Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire. Okay, Youth Worker Nation, I'm here with Casey Shannon, and Casey is a lot of things. And we're going to have him tell us a little bit about that, but right now he's with Moments of Hope, which is David and Marilynn Chadwick at Forest Hills Church. This is an outside ministry that goes beyond the walls of their church. And those guys have been in ministry, I think, 38 years at this church, right?
Correct. Yep.
About 7,000 people.
Yep.
In the Charlotte area, but you're doing this work with them.
Yeah.
You played baseball in college?
No, I could have. I didn't.
Okay,
I played baseball through high school, and then decided to go in a different direction. Knew I was going to be about 5'0" and 100 nothing in that college, but I had a chance to go play.
Unfortunately, I relate with that.
Yeah, I had a chance to play. I was offered. I got offered another thing, and it looked like it was going to be better. So
yeah.
I went
So
that way.
tell us a little bit about your life from then till now.
Grew up in Durham, North Carolina. I guess probably the highlights there are. Durham was a neat town. Moved there in '83, so middle school would have been the late '80s. So you had kind of the beginnings of Duke basketball.
Oh, yeah.
You're right in the throes of Carolina and NC State.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what everybody equates to the Triangle area is college basketball. And that's right. When I first moved there, the first decision every kid's got to make is what jersey are you following? And then you got to follow.
Yeah.
So I chose UNC, and I was the black sheep in the family because of that. But the passion for me was baseball, like you said. And so there was the Durham Bulls, and this was pre-Bull Durham. And they were very much what you saw in the movie, just a local, yokel, colorful town, wonderful old baseball stadium, Durham Athletic Park. And I really grew up there. Mm-hmm. From first girlfriend to first job, I was a bat boy for the Durham Bulls. My parents owned the box that Susan Sarandon sat in the movie.
Oh, wow.
I grew up as a small child learning radio and baseball from legends in both those industries. I grew up with Luke Appling and Bob Feller and Willie Stargell and Phil Necro and all these people literally sitting with me explaining the game to me. So baseball is just in my DNA.
That is crazy.
And then moved into high school, and I played baseball all the way through high school. Had a shot. We moved to Ruston, Louisiana from Durham, North Carolina, which is a whole different story, but a bit of a culture shock. Going
Very
from
much so.
Going from
been
the
in that
Bible
area.
belt buckle to the end of the belt. So
I was a Carolina boy, and I spent some time in Louisiana.
There you go. So it's a different world, especially northern Louisiana. It's not what you equate to. I married a New Orleans gal, and Ruston's very different than New Orleans. Ruston's more South Arkansas than Louisiana. So, but God really blessed me because I got to play more baseball in Ruston, and that's where my chance to play at the next level came. But I was offered a full ride to go do something else, and that was radio, and kind of never looked back. So
yeah. So you did. So tell me, you've done a lot in radio then, and then you and I talked about your work in the hotel industry.
Yeah. So
So give me a synopsis of both of those because I want you to tell about where you met my friend.
Yeah. So I was a hospitality major because my dad told me that I needed to major in business, and I didn't want to major in business, so hospitality was the easy out. Hospitality is kind of a catch-all. You can do hotels, you can do administration, you can do park services.
Yes.
I liked the idea of hotels, so I studied that. I also basically double majored in English because I wanted to go to law school, but I really fell in love with journalism, minored in PR and journalism, ran the college radio station, worked in radio, wrote for the newspapers on college and off campus. Just was one of those hustlers from birth.
What college again?
It's Northwestern State University. Most people wouldn't have heard of it. I was offered a chance to go play baseball at Loyola, and I was offered basically a free ride to Northwestern State, and I chose the free ride.
Good choice.
It made more sense. So the free ride was based on me doing all of those things, by the way,
Yes.
but it was a lot of fun. And it's in a small town. The only reason people know Natchitoches, Louisiana is it's where Steel Magnolias was filmed. And it's also very much like the movie portrays it. It's a quirky little southern town.
Wow.
Lots of fun. So anyway, coming out of college, you need to know I met my wife there. We started a family there, and I needed to make some pretty big life decisions. I couldn't muddle about. We didn't have the ability to afford to do that. So moved to Atlanta and started with Hyatt Hotels, and that's a rocket ride, hotel management, if you're a hustler. And in 3 years' time...
And you are.
Yeah. Well, it's just, I'm programmed that way.
Yeah.
In 3 years' time, moved on to several different iterations within that industry and all the way to where I wanted to be, which was golf resort management. At pretty much the top of the house there, I was the revenue manager and rooms exec at a 5-star resort in St. Andrews, Scotland. It's now a Fairmont. Back then it was owned by the Chateau Alon Company and the St. Andrews Bay Golf Resort and Spa. But that was an interesting time. St. Andrews, even after 9/11, you really, during golf season, you don't have to do much. You just sort of stand back and let it happen because everybody wants to go play golf in St. Andrews and your hotel's constantly full. But Scotland during the wintertime, there's only a few hours of daylight and it's freezing cold. So we had to get creative with ways to fill the hotel, and one of those ways was to bring in this movie crew who offered to pay almost nothing for our rooms, but we're going to sell our hotel out on during a season where it was going to be really hard to do that.
Yes.
As they got ready to ramp up production in the spring for this movie that we knew was going to be about Bobby Jones, and we didn't know much else about it. So a couple things came out of that. First thing was I knew that there were going to be 2 weeks where we didn't have enough rooms. And St. Andrews, Scotland is a tiny village with 2 very nice hotels, and the rest of them are basically bed and breakfasts. So I was going to have to tell this movie crew, or whoever was in charge of this movie crew, that we didn't have enough rooms at the inn for all of their people. I needed to figure out how to do that. So as they're checking in, I made sure I posted up at the front desk and saw a guest tile that said Charlotte, North Carolina, and said, oh, well, I'm from Charlotte. Maybe I've got an inn here. So I reached out to the person that was checking in and said, are you from Charlotte? And they said, no, we're not with that part of the production team, but that guy over there is. I said, well, cool. I'd really like to meet him. My dad, I'm from Charlotte. My dad still lives there. Just trying to find an inn to get me through this awkward situation.
Yes.
So up walks a gentleman named Rick Eldridge, who God brought into my life at that moment. And we've been connected ever since. And Rick said, I'm from Charlotte. What do you want to know? I said, well, I'm from Charlotte. My dad's Danny Fontana. He said, well, you've got to be kidding me. I was at Danny's house 2 nights ago for a fundraiser.
Wow.
And we hit it off pretty quickly, which made it easier for me. It wasn't easy, but it made it easier for me to tell him that we needed to get creative. And we ended up putting Jim Caviezel, who I didn't know was in the movie, who Rick had just pulled down off the cross, literally, for the Jesus movie, to do this Bobby Jones movie. And he's playing Bobby Jones. And we put him in this farmhouse that we had access to. And we moved some other people around. It was just a really neat experience and enriching. And Rick pulled me down on set. You know Rick. You're good friends.
Yes.
Once you're in with Rick, you're in. And he's just a great guy.
Yes.
And then lo and behold, a season later, I moved back to Charlotte to help my biological father start a Christian and business media thing. And Rick walks back into my life. And now he's the chairman of my board for this nonprofit that we're running. So
yeah, this is a new venture for you.
it is.
You didn't really want to do this at first. You talked about.
No, yes. So David's been my senior pastor. Marilyn's his wife.
Yeah.
Since I moved back to Charlotte, and I was connected to them through my biological father.
Give them the name of the ministry one more time.
Moments of Hope is the ministry.
Right.
It's really parachurch. It's a parallel track to the heart of the church that and their heart really is the local church. It always will be. That's Forest Hill out of Charlotte. They have been faithfully serving that community for 37 years now, going on 38. Came there in 1980, never left, and all this is a desire for them to write some more books and see what God would do with that content. Plus, they've got years and years and years of content. And so the church didn't have capacity for that, and it was decided that it was right to come alongside them with this separate 501c3.
Yeah.
And off we went. So that's what we're doing here. But yes, when they initially talked to me about doing this, the pitch that David gave to me for running this sounded very familiar to the pitch that I heard from my biological father, and that's a whole separate story. So my biological father, and I keep saying biological father because we were separated for 25 years.
Yes.
My mother and he divorced when I was 3, and all that time in Durham and everything I was talking about, I didn't know him or where he was. When I left, he was a struggling shoe salesman in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Wow.
But my mom remarried. That's why I have a different last name, and my biological father's name is Danny Fontana. People who follow money media or really Charlotte media or any sort of business news might recognize that name.
Yes.
It was a pretty big name in that world for a long time. 25 years after we left, I had started a family, and whereas before I didn't really have a need to rekindle that relationship because I had a dad who adopted me and loved me, and
he was dad.
Yeah, which was awesome too, and a whole other story.
Yeah.
But as I started my own family, I started to think, okay, wait a second, 25 years is a long time. If this guy has any paternal instinct or regret at all, boy, I really feel bad. So at some point along the way, I got an email from a cousin of mine saying, my name's Angel, of all names, and I think I'm your cousin. Are you Danny Fontana's son? So I called my mom and I said, do I have a cousin named Angel? She said, yeah, you do. And I said, well, that's neat. And so prayed about it and thought about it and was very, very young in my Christian walk at that time. And we started a relationship via email, which led to a lot of things and culminated with, I was running a hotel that was being renovated at the time and I was very busy and hadn't responded to his email that he had last sent me for maybe a week, and he's a very impatient man, and so he emailed back and said, I've done something wrong, obviously. I don't know what it is. I'm very sorry. Please forgive me. What he didn't know was I was being recruited to go to St. Andrews. That's where the St. Andrews came in. And I emailed him back and said, look, I'm really busy, man. I'm sorry. It's been a week, but I apologize. You need to know that I'm being recruited to go to St. Andrews, Scotland, and you also need to know that right after you sent me that email, I just got notification from U.S. Airways that my trip to go out there to be romanced by this hotel company just got rerouted from Pittsburgh to Charlotte on my connection. So I'm going to be in Charlotte on this day. Do you want to meet? And that's the first time we met.
Wow.
That was very much a God thing. God was working in his life at a very young stage. David Chadwick was the guy who did that for him.
Yeah.
That's another incredible God story. Matter of fact, we were meeting with a bunch of people yesterday with Rick, and Rick came up with the phrase, and he's right. I'm basically the Christian Forrest Gump. I never efforted any of these things. But kind of
Are you okay with that name?
Yeah, I told him, I'm really gumpy, and my Christian walk really isn't a product of any striving at all. God has taken me to incredible places and connected me out to incredible people, and I don't deserve any of it. But it's fun to sit back and sort of reflect on it and go, it's been really neat, and I didn't do any of it.
Yes. Wow, that's
so I
cool to hear.
I connected back out to my dad, and then all the St. Andrew stuff happened, and then I moved back to help him, and all the Charlotte Rick stuff happened, and it's been a really, really fun journey, which brought me to here, and then David's pitch to me to join what I'm doing now, Moments of Hope, sounded very similar to what my dad asked me to do. And you need to know that eventually, even though we were given a good long run, we eventually failed miserably in what we tried to do with my dad's media ministry as well as his businesses. And he passed away a couple years ago. And so it's been a hard season. So when David initially pitched, I think you should come do this, I think God's telling me you should come do this, my reaction was a recoil. I didn't know. I don't want to do that to
Too many
anybody
scars,
again.
too much pain.
And I also didn't want to lead from a posture of defensiveness.
Yes.
Always looking for snakes in the grass and some boogeyman around the corner.
Yeah.
But as we continued to talk about it and God continued to do a work on me, it became obvious that this is a very different thing. And it is, and it's been fun.
Well, tell me about your middle school, high school years. We're talking to youth workers or even your college years.
Sure.
Who is that person from 11 to 22 that just kind of lit your fire? Other than your parents, I know that they were obviously heroes in your life.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be about Christianity, but who is that person that turned some light bulb on?
Yeah, I think it's probably the same answers you'll get from a lot of people who were student athletes. I had some coaches. I had some bad coaches, but I had a couple of coaches that, and it wasn't one of the, you hear stories about coaches really leaning into somebody who really needed it. I didn't need a father figure. I played with kids who did, but I had a couple coaches who went above and beyond, and just being who they were meant something to me. One I didn't play for. Actually, a couple I didn't play for, and now that I think about it, and several that I did. The ones I didn't play for, growing up in Durham, North Carolina, Dean Smith was just a tremendous figure in my formative years. Dean was an interesting dynamic of a man. He wasn't outspoken about what he was about, but his actions spoke for him, and you knew a guy who integrated the ACC and UNC for all the right reasons and really brought on a storm upon himself and bore it for all the right reasons. A Christian man who wasn't afraid to speak grace and truth through his platform and to his players. And now being with David, who played basketball for Dean Smith back in the 60s and 70s, and really kind of getting a peek behind the curtain of the UNC family, it's amazing the lasting effect that man's life, and I think a real unwilling ministry to these players has had. He played the game the right way. He coached the game the right way. I wrote a blog after he died. The reason why I became a UNC fan was because of Michael Jordan. I was a baseball player. Michael Jordan was a baseball player.
Yeah.
That was the guy. It didn't have anything to do with basketball.
Yeah.
I was too young for it to really have any. I loved baseball, and this guy played baseball, so cool. That's who I'm going to root for.
Right.
And then the UNC affinity grew, and first it was Michael, then it was the baby blue uniforms, and then somewhere down the line I noticed Dean. And that nature about him really has always stuck with me. So it was Dean. And then there was another guy that I didn't play for, whose name is Grady Little, who was most people know him as a major league manager for the Red Sox when they just collapsed against the Yankees. It's a shame that that's what he's known for. A wonderful Texan, a wonderful baseball mind, and a guy who did take me under his wing. I grew up in a locker room. It'd be a tough place to grow up in when you're a bat boy in a single-A locker room. There's all kinds of stuff flying around those places, and he always made sure that he was there to sort of deflect some of those things when I need to, but also let me experience some things too. And he was just a really cool guy. Still is a guy that we connect out to every once in a while. He's still a Charlotte, North Carolina guy, even though he's gone on to bigger and better things. And I think he actually coaches at a Christian high school now in Charlotte, or volunteers his time there, along with consulting with some other folks. So and then there were some coaches I played for baseball. There's Coach Bobby Crans in Ruston, Louisiana, which no one would know except for me and the guys who played for him. Great Christian witness. Even when I really walked away from the faith, some of the things Bobby gave me has stuck with me. And I don't know where he is and what he's doing now, but I hope that man knows that he had an effect on a lot of his players. So,
what would you say to coaches that are either starting off or they're already involved in coaching? Maybe they're a little bit burned by just all the years and negative things said to them by parents. You know, parents are defending their kids and all kinds of things. Middle school, high school, and then we'll say something to college coaches. But what would you say to those middle school, high school coaches?
Yeah, you know, I mean, we were talking off mic. Your wife's, is she still a teacher or a former teacher?
Former teacher.
Former teacher. My wife's a teacher. Similar
fourth
sort of.
grade. Yeah.
Yeah. So my wife's a fourth grade teacher. Now she taught in the inner cities where the parents weren't really the problem. The problem was you really couldn't engage. You couldn't get them engaged.
My wife's students were almost all Hispanic.
Yeah, there you
and
go.
she took French.
Well, there you go.
So, yes.
So I think coaching.
And they couldn't speak English.
Coaching is a bit of a catch-all like it is teachers. It depends on where they are, what sphere they're operating in. If you're a coach in the inner city, that dynamic's different than. Maybe not as much for a teacher than it would be in an affluent neighborhood in South Charlotte per se.
Yes.
So I guess my encouragement across the board, it would be different for depending on where they are. But my encouragement across the board is the same I would have to somebody starting off in media or just in any walk of life. Be passionate about it. Check your passion. Make sure, turn that mirror on yourself. Is this really what you're called to do, or did you just go down this road and it's just sort of inertia's brought you here? Does it wake you up in the morning and you're excited about it? Because that's what's going to outrun the tough spots.
Yes. Yeah.
Second, be authentic, whatever that is. And we all have to have mentors in our life, and it's good to it's very good to seek counsel. It's biblical, and to emulate people you see who are successful. But you have to be authentic to yourself, whatever that is, whatever it is you're passionate about. And usually that's a subset underneath the coaching, and everybody wants to move kids. That's an easy calling. I mean, the easy part is I want to change a kid's life. Oh, congratulations, you and most of the world want to do that.
Yeah.
What facet of that are you passionate about? Is it a Christian witness? I mean, that's what Bobby Crans didn't. He wanted to win baseball games, and he beat us to death. I mean, we practiced harder than any baseball team ever.
Yeah.
But man, he was more interested in making sure that those prayers before games and his witness as a man really had a lasting effect, and it probably cost him his job down the road. But that was what he was passionate about.
Yeah.
What is it that moves you? And be authentic about that. Is it inner city kids? Is it, are you a baseball fan and you don't think baseball has enough access out there, and there's poor kids who don't get the opportunity? Chase that. If you're not chasing what you're passionate about, you are going to flame out. That teaching, coaching, anything like that, where you're never going to make enough money, and really the lasting effect is going to happen long after these children have passed through your program. There's got to be an underlying passion that really trumps the idea of just coaching or teaching, would be what I would offer.
Youth Worker Nation, here's what I'm getting from all this, and that is, who are you? And whoever you are, be that person. Don't try to be somebody else. There's a guy in podcast world called JLD, EO Fire, John Lee Dumas, and he says, compare and despair. Compare and despair. If you try to be somebody else that you're not, just because you like somebody else or you see what they've done, then you're just not going to make it.
Yeah, and I exist in a world where there's a lot of leadership gurus.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of sort of templative projections as if you do it this way, you can also become a leadership guru. And look, I think that probably comes from a good place. It also comes from a place that people want to share the knowledge they have. I mean, I manage an organization that does this.
Yes.
What I would say about leadership gurus and leadership examples are, take those templates, but understand that nothing's cookie cutter in the world of moving people. The only way you move people is by coming from a place that you own and that's authentically you. If you're speaking from somebody else's platform and you're just operating in platitudes that someone else has given you, you're never going to, they may say you moved them, but you wouldn't have moved them. It needs to come from you. And a big part of that is being brave enough to be you. It's a vulnerable thing. Most people don't want to do it. So it's good to have mentors, and it's good to use examples. And by all means, read these books by these people who have all this knowledge, but understand that you've got to infuse you and overlay it with that stuff. You do it the other way around, you're never really going to reach anybody.
Yeah. Give me your best book. What book would you recommend for coaches or youth workers?
God, there's so many layers. I'm a book guy. I'm a media guy. There's so many layers to that. I think, okay, so let's just stick in the coaches.
And you can go, by the way, it could be a book, it could be a movie,
well,
YouTube,
it'll be
whatever.
A book. It'll be a book. So from a coach's perspective, and let's go male coach's perspective.
Okay.
And I could go purpose-driven life. That's just a great one. And I could go,
right.
Because I do believe that we get, especially in the coaching ranks, you get so caught up in performance.
Mm-hmm.
I love to hear coaches talk about purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm talking about, that underlying thing. What's your purpose?
Yeah.
Is it growing young people? Is it witness? What is it? It can't just be, if it's just wins and losses. That's what I loved about Dean. It's what I love about all the really good coaches out there. So I'm going to go for a man because there's particular layers to a man that are unique. I loved 7 seasons of A Man in the Mirror. And I would encourage any guy who's bumped up against that plateau, and we all know it when we hit it, where, man, I'm not growing like I want to grow. Especially somebody like me who's got a high bounce rate and is a doer, but also likes to strategize and think and use my brain, and can get caught in that trap of, man, I'm not moving anymore. What's wrong with me? That's a really cool book if you're in that season.
Yeah.
And it invites you to be brave enough to consider things like saying no, which I have a very difficult time. And there's a lot of different lessons to glean from there. That's what I would say. It's a book I haven't read in a long time. I should go back and revisit it. But in terms of the coaching ranks and hitting that spot in your life, check that book out. It's neat.
And by the way, no is a great thing. You know, there was a movie that Jim Carrey was in that was on the guy who he had to say yes all the time.
Yes, man.
Yeah, yes, man.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily what you'd recommend in a Christian world, but because of the word language. But there was a truth in there.
Yeah.
And one of my buddies who's a missionary, student missions, he did that for a year, even though he said he had a therapist and he had his wife, and she found out what he was doing because he's saying yes to everything, and she knew that he didn't like to go to her meetings. So she knew. So she go, okay, honey, I need you to go to this meeting. Yes, dear. Because for a year he said yes.
Okay. That's an unhealthy thing. How did he make it through that year?
He said it was a tough year. He said it was good for him. He said, but it was a very difficult year because he's kind of a guarded person too. Okay. Very funny guy. But JLD, with this EO fire that we've talked about, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to everything else in your life that could have come during that time. So saying yes is not always the right answer. No is the one that guys like you and me have to practice doing a lot.
Yeah. If you're a people pleaser, if you, my pastor calls it the approval addiction. If you really suffer from this, man, I don't want to let people down.
I think a lot in education and youth ministry and youth workers are.
Well, and if you've got an athletic background,
yes,
you believe. There's a part of you that's programmed to believe, well, if I work hard enough, I can get it done.
Correct.
And there becomes an efficiency and an optimization problem just within yourself. But more so than that, you're right. You inhibit personal growth when you overextend. So know what's important to you. I mean, I would invite everybody to even just explore and write down, what are your core values? What shoots out of that's important to you? How does that fit into what you do for a living? Right?
Yeah.
And then start from there and see what happens. It can help a lot. And read that book if you're a man.
Yeah. So how can people reach you if they want to reach you concerning, moments of hope or anything on a personal level that you don't mind them reaching out to you with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Casey, Casey, is named after Casey Stengel, baseball guys. So Casey at momentsofhope.org is the easy way to reach out to me. And if you want to know more about the organization, just shoot me a line and I'll tell you where to go. But thanks for the opportunity. Really cool podcast. Enjoyed being on.
All right, Casey. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank
See
you.
you, Youth Worker Nation.
Yeah, man.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.